that if you're not agreeing with your stakeholders, you say, okay, I'll build that, and then you say, okay, Daniel, let's say Daniel is my customer, my client, and then I'm a project manager. He said, Darajay, I want you to build a 6-story apartment, and this is what I want. Okay, I say, right, I'll write down, I say, okay, that's fine. Then the next day, and then he may come in and say 2 weeks later, oh, by the way, I forgot that we need to include a movie theater. What would be my response to him? Because we already agreed with the first set of requirements. Now he's changing the scope. If he changed the scope, you know what will happen? He changed time, he changed quality, he changed deliverables. So you remember that triple constraint? If you change the scope, quality, and time, then everything shifts. So for me, to make my deliverable on time, I have to calculate my scope. I have to calculate my cost. I have to arrange requirements. I have to arrange resources. So in that case, I have to agree with Daniel, first of all, what he wanted to do. Then I will have him write and then sign. Otherwise, what will happen is that, what Daniel's request actually creeps the scope. It actually expands the scope. Then before you know it, you agree with this amount, 2 million, but he added additional information. Then he's expecting you to finish it with the additional requirement with the original plan. That's where most projects fail. And that's why scope is really, really, really important. And that's where, as a project manager, your technical skills comes to effect. So that's what we're going to discuss today.
So every project has a scope?
Every project has a scope.
I remember last time when you said about this agile management system, the program can shift. The project can shift. Some programs can add. So the scope will change, right?
Okay. So, Fisum was asking me that with that scope, we agree that every project should have a scope. Okay, but what you are referring is you have your project. Okay, you agreed with your customer and then stakeholders what need to be delivered. The next step is, you remember, this is the first part we discuss. And what you are asking me is how I deliver that system. Should I use the waterfall methodology where I have to finish 100% of my requirement before I start designing, then 100% of design material before I start developing, 100% of the development material before I start testing? That's what's called the waterfall. Or should I just do an agile where you can come and then fix? These are the methodologies how we do it. But regardless of the size, the scope, the complexity of a project, every single project has a scope. Okay? How you adjust that scope is something which we will be discussing in the next couple of slides.
I think in a broader sense, scope is how you define your project. The objective, the purpose, and you go down and you break it down. Now, in some, like if you see some project studies, some professionals used the word scope, for example, when they define introduction. So then they define the scope of the project. In some cases, they don't say scope, but they are defining the scope, like the purpose, the objective, the breakdown structure, and so it will go on. So scope encompasses all that thing. From the beginning to the end, you detail your project, where you start and where you end. So there is a most important part of that. I think the Raja will come to that. There is a work breakdown structure. That is where you detail your project until the beginning. Then it means you know your purpose, you know your objective, you know what resource takes you there.
Yep. I mean, this is a fascinating part of project management. And then you'll start realizing, oh my God, okay, this is how things should be simplified. Because if Daniel, because remember, what Daniel, statement, I want to have a 6-story apartment in Silver Spring. Okay, if I go back and then ask you from the process, which part of the process we were referring? From the initiation all the way. It's initiation. Okay, Daniel has no idea. He's a rich man, and then he wanted to do business. But he knows that he has that scope. He has the higher level scope. He say, I want to have that 6-story apartment. Now, Asmamaw is the project manager for that, and he won the bid. And before he starts the contract or the construction, he's going to go with a series of meetings with Daniel and then his assistants. Because Daniel is a busy man. He said, I have money, I want this one, and then he moved on. Okay, his deputy is a stakeholder who will be, dealing with Asmamaw's team, and Asmamaw has about 6, 7, 8 different expertise. Then you're going to go through the whole process of defining your scope, refining your scope, breaking it down to the lowest level so that you know exactly how much money it costs you to build. And because the reason why we have is you have your scope, then scope, once you get your scope, the next one is you're going to design your time when you're going to deliver. And then the third one is you're going to estimate how much that project is costing you. And then the last one is how is that quality is assured. That's why I told this one the technical part, because they are all interrelated. One is dependent on the other. So if you see here on the overview, it says that you will learn about the component of project scope, its purpose in clearly defining the deliverables. So we're going to learn a lot of jargons here, the PM jargons, deliverables for the end users to identify what is needed and what is not. By the way, defining a scope is also defining what you are not doing for Daniel. So in that case, it clarifies. Means that, okay, Mr. Daniel, I will build the scope of the project. We agree is I will build your apartment, but I'm not going to manage it. I'm not responsible for managing. Okay, or I will build your apartment, but I'm not going to do other than like fencing or doing other. So you need to know what is included and what is not included. That's part of the scope. Okay, and then we're going to go to the techniques and then the tools, the steps. These are the learning objectives. So now, this is the definition of scope. Is the process required to ensure that project include all the work required and only the work required. It qualifies all the work and then only the work, because customer has a tendency of forgetting. They forget stuff and then they come back and say, oh, by the way, I want this. And the next time say, oh, by the way, I want this. Before you know it, what you agreed on your in the scope triangle is pretty much different what the customer wants. Okay? Now, as a PM, you may not right away say, no, I can't do this. You cannot, because I work for Daniel. But there is a way for me to explain to him, yeah, oh, that's good, but remember this. Every time you change your requirement, then we have to go back and then review the impact. And remember, there is a theory in management. It's called the theory of chaos and complexity. The theory of chaos and complexity tells you that, you remember, from your elementary math, the Newton theory, for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Okay, so there is a linear connection between X and Y. Okay, if you have 10X, then you're going to have 10Y. Yes, that's the linear connection. But in project management, that theory is no longer applied, because if you change your scope here, then your time changes, your quality change, customer expectation change, everything change. That means that instead of this, instead of linear, you're going to have a dynamic relationship. That's what the theory of chaos and complexity is, because there is a researcher who was working for the National Weather Service, weather forecasting, and he was doing with like 25 digits number. And right before he left to his coffee break, he changed accidentally one of the numbers, and then he left. When he came back, that fast computer processes, and then he brought like totally different data sets. And that's what he started developing this theory, is that there is always a fine line. Okay, there is always this is a fine line between the two systems. But when there is a smaller change, then the impact is really, really big. That's why he developed the theory of complexity. So the same thing here in project. If you change one scope, everything is going to change. So that's why it says only the work required to complete the project successfully. So managing the project scope is primarily concerned with what? Defining it, what you want, okay? And yeah.